So I'm going to ask an unusual question for an American audience. Who likes cricket? Right. Keep your hand up if you don't like cricket. Oh no, you love it. Yes, the Indian guys, right? We're going to come back. Everyone who had their hand up is going to get a vote later on. All right. Ball tampering. Troy McGuinness. Where's Troy McGuinness? There he is. What does it mean to you, ball tampering? Tapegate versus Deflategate. Australia versus the United States of America. And we've got 4 gentlemen in this picture. And for the Americans in the audience, actually, the most famous person in this slide is not who you would think. It's the guy in the middle of the 3 here, Steve Smith, the former captain of the Australian cricket team. And why is he more famous than the guy on the right? Because the guy on the right is known to this international audience as Gisela Bundchen's husband. While Steve Smith is a household name throughout India and many other parts of the world where they play cricket. One of the world's most famous and successful cricket players. This is, of course, Tom Brady, the quarterback for the New England Patriots. Now, what's the story here? What happened? Well, the Australian part of the story is very recent. It's from the last 2 or 3 weeks. Australia was touring South Africa in what's called a test match series. And there were 4 test matches in the series, and the third of those matches was held in Cape Town. And these, Steve Smith, the captain, and David Warner, the vice captain, and Cameron Bancroft, the one of the 3 on the right, they conspired to tamper with the ball, and they got caught. Now, they tampered with the ball, they got caught. Australia still lost the match by 322 runs. And Troy McGuinness will tell us that that was embarrassing, right? And the Indians will confirm that losing a test match by 322 runs is a disaster. Thank you. So the ball tampering didn't actually make any difference whatsoever. Right. Meanwhile, the story on the right-hand side, the Tom Brady story, is from 3 years ago, where in for the foreigners in the room, the semi-final of the championship, known as the AFL Championship game, the New England Patriots underinflated the balls they were going to use in a match against the Indianapolis Colts. And it was a day with very bad weather and slippery conditions, and this enabled Tom Brady and his New England Patriots to win the game by 45-7. What happened next? Well, in the Australian case, Smith, Warner, and Bancroft were immediately sent home in disgrace, banned for 1 test match. The head of Cricket Australia, David Peever, made an official apology, and there was a statement from Malcolm Turnbull, the Prime Minister of Australia, which largely amounted to a national apology to the international world of cricket. And this is a direct quote: "Australian cheating was beyond belief." That's the equivalent of the President of the United States apologizing for Tom Brady underinflating footballs. And now it doesn't click. Right. Meanwhile, what happened with Brady? Well, not much. They were allowed to play in the final despite cheating in the semi-final. So they played the Super Bowl 49, and they narrowly defeated the Seattle Seahawks 28-24 to become the NFL Super Bowl champions. And only after that had happened did the NFL consider any sanctions against Brady. So, what were the consequences for the 3 Australians in the last 3 weeks? And this is still an ongoing story, so this list of consequences could yet grow longer. Smith and Warner were banned from leadership positions for 2 years. Bancroft was banned from leadership positions for the rest of his life. All 3 were banned from Australian domestic cricket and international cricket for 1 year. All 3 were banned. The team coach, Darren Lehman, who was exonerated of any wrongdoing, resigned anyway for showing poor leadership and creating a dysfunctional culture. They were all given the 1-match suspension, which I've described to you, and they were fined 75% of their match fee for the match in Cape Town. Smith and Warner were banned from playing in the India Premier League, the IPL, for 1 year. Smith had to resign his captaincy of the Rajasthan Royals, and Warner resigned his captaincy of the Hyderabad Sunrisers. Their salaries for those 2 jobs are $1.6 million per year each. In addition to that, they lose salary for playing in Australia for a year, and they lose their match fees for playing for the international team, quite possibly for the rest of their playing careers. And they lost lucrative sponsorship endorsements. Steve Smith had his own Lance Armstrong moment. Right? If you know the history there, Lance Armstrong lost $70 million in endorsements in a single day when it was revealed that he had been drug cheating. Well, apparently Weet-Bix doesn't believe that cheating is compatible with their brand values. So Steve Smith has lost all his endorsement contracts. Let's compare to what happened to Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. Brady was suspended for 4 games, but only after they'd won the Super Bowl. The team was fined $1 million. That's less money than Smith has been fined effectively. And they lost 2 draft picks for the following year's season. So the question for everyone who had their hand up a little bit earlier is, did the Australians overreact? Troy McGuinness, do you believe the Australians he has skin in the game because he's Australian? Do you think the Australians overreacted? No. Indians, do you think the Australians overreacted? No, not at all. Right, general audience now, raise your hand if you believe that the Australian reaction to what I've just described is an overreaction. Because clearly it's way more excessive than the sanctions against Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. Was it an overreaction? No, actually not too many. Most of you think that, no, it was an appropriate level. So therefore, most of you think that the New England Patriots should have been punished a lot more heavily for their underinflated. Certainly here in Seattle, we agree with you. Right, so why is this Australian reaction so strong? Playing cricket is core to the Australian identity. Right, sports are core to part of the Australian culture. This very dapper-looking crew here from the Australian Olympic team. A sense of fairness is core to Australian values and Australian identity. Fair do's and fair go are common expressions in Strine dialect. Strine dialect is their version of English. Ball tampering. It just isn't cricket. This is an expression in the English language for all the Americans in the room. Cricket is synonymous with fair play, to the point where this is a common expression that we all grew up with. The Indians, the British, the Australians, the New Zealanders, the South Africans in the room here. It just isn't cricket to tamper with the ball. Right? For Scottish people, we don't really play cricket, but it's the equivalent of moving your golf ball before the shot. To paraphrase Malcolm Turnbull, we are not a nation of ball tamperers. Meanwhile, the South Africans really enjoyed this. Right? So this is a scene from the third test, but this is a scene from the fourth test after Smith, Bancroft, and Warner have all been sent home. Now, it turned out that the tape in Bancroft's pocket wasn't tape at all, it was sandpaper. Sandpaper special, only 10 rand. That's less than $1. And need a ball wax camera. And these were just some of the banners that were held up during the fourth test. So, for Australians, for the general cricket fans around the world, it was not fair play. It just wasn't cricket. But for Australians, this got like core to the psyche of the entire nation. It wasn't who they are. And it was this national embarrassment. And it allowed the South Africans, who won the test series anyway, the South Africans to have some extra gloating. Probably for the next 4, 8, 10 years, something like that. Right, sanctions against Smith, Warner, and Bancroft reflect how deeply offended the Australian sense of self. Identity wins. Who you are rules over everything else. The why you do something, the how you do it, the what you're doing, the logic of some situation is overruled by the identity. If you analysed logically, well, they did a little bit of cheating. Now, what exactly was going on there? They were using the sandpaper to rough up one side of the ball. Now, normally, if you watch cricket bowlers, before they bowl, they're walking around doing this, rubbing the ball on their trousers. And they're rubbing only one side of the ball to make it shiny, to try and protect the surface on one side of the ball, and the other side gets roughed up from people batting. So gradually, as the ball ages, one side is shiny and the other side is rough. And for the Americans in the room, if you understand the concept of pitching a curveball, cricket bowlers do the same thing, and it's known as swing bowling. And in the right weather conditions, then the ball will swing to the right or left based on how the bowler holds the ball when they bowl it. So, relatively minor offence if you analyse it logically in terms of it certainly didn't affect the outcome of the game or the series. But the sanctions are severe, and it remains to be seen whether Smith and Warner's careers will recover. Bancroft, who suffered less financially, but he was the actual ball tamperer. Smith was the captain who told him to do it, and Warner was the vice captain who agreed it was a good idea. Well, not so much now. Right, so this is advice from the Kanban Coaching Masterclass. Look for an identity-related explanation for behavior before you seek a logical explanation based on why, what, or how. If you want to understand why the sitting president of the United States got elected, think about identity of the people who elected him. If you want to understand why the United Kingdom is leaving the European Union, look to the identity of the people who voted leave in the referendum. Identity wins. First who, then why, and after that the what and the how. Leadership maturity, and the subtitle of this talk, Leadership maturity will always constrain your organizational maturity. All right, so there's a new book out, and we gave you all a complimentary copy of it in your bag. And you might have been in Theodora's session yesterday to learn about the Kanban maturity model. And now I'm going to talk about how leadership relates to organizational maturity and the levels in the maturity model. Right, the thesis of the talk is that your organizational maturity can never exceed the leadership maturity, and if it does briefly, it will regress back. There will be some form of failure. All right, the KMM puts culture and leadership before practice adoption. That was the key message in Theodora's talk yesterday morning. And we've now said that 3 times. Here's a picture of the maturity model. Now, obviously, level 6 is the deepest level, and therefore you'd say, well, we should aspire to be a level 6 organization, at least for periods of time in the history of a company. But to do that, you need a level 6 leader, which means if you don't have one, someone has to aspire to be that level 6 leader. And what does that mean? It's someone who is capable of challenging who we are, why we exist, what we do, and how we do it, and all of those things. Right? So if we're going to have an appraisal method, and we're going to make the KMM really an effective tool for coaching, we need to be able to codify leadership. We need to have a world where Kanban coaches can walk into an organization and through some form of information discovery, it could just be talking to people, and this is a work in progress for us, but some form of information discovery, they have to be able to make a determination of what is the level of the leadership here. Because if you've walked into a company that has level 1 leadership and the words coming out of their mouth say, we'd really like a bit of level 4, then you're not going to get them there unless you can somehow transform those leaders and their behavior, their values, and as a consequence affect the culture. Right, so what I'm presenting today is unashamedly a work in progress. This will be something that we'll be working on throughout the beta period for the KMM as we develop the appraisal method and an extension for the KMM called the Leadership Practices Extension. And this talk has been inspired by my recent stay in South Africa. Many of you know I've been taking time off to do writing, and I spent quite a large chunk of time living in and around Cape Town earlier this year. I'd already left by the time of the test match, though I wasn't actually there. That happened about a week after that I'd left. Right, so I want to give you something to think about. We're going to revisit this at the end of the talk. This is a level 6 leadership problem I'm going to present to you. This is a recent photograph of a white supremacist waving an old flag. In this case, this is the flag of the previous Republic of South Africa, and it's often referred to as the Apartheid Era Flag. Actually, the flag dates from the 1930s, and apartheid actually started in 1947, 48. South Africans in the back, 47. But the flag is widely referred to as the Apartheid Era Flag. Now, it happens that waving this flag is this gentleman's constitutional right. But on the 27th of February, the Nelson Mandela Foundation petitioned South Africa's Equality Court asking for gratuitous displays of the flag of the old republic to be banned. They want the old flag banned. This is a picture of the new president of South Africa when he was much younger. This is Cyril Ramaphosa. Nelson Mandela, I'm sure you recognize, and sitting next to him is Thabo Mbeki, the second president of the new Republic of South Africa. Cyril Ramaphosa is largely the architect of the South African Constitution. He was the ANC's chief negotiator in the years between 1990 and 1994, the time when Nelson Mandela was freed from prison up until the elections when he became the president of the new republic. So, Cyril Ramaphosa and the courts face this level 6 leadership problem of do they now change the constitution of the Republic of South Africa to ban the old flag? And at the end, we're going to see what you think about this problem. Something for you to think about while I'm talking. Leadership maturity. So, 7 levels in the KMM, 0 through 6. And let's take a look at what the low maturity levels, 0, 1, 2, actually mean. Well, at sort of the 0 level, there isn't really leadership of an organization. 0 level, it's not an organization, it's just a loosely affiliated group of individuals. But by level 1, we've got some leadership in there. Level 2, a bit more. But it's a world of, I'm doing better than the other guy, right? As long as I'm doing better than my colleague, I'll get a better review and a better bonus, and I will climb over them and stab them all in the back in order to make sure that I'm doing better than them. Or we are doing better than those other guys. Doesn't matter how good we actually are, as long as there's some other tribe that we can look at and say, they're a lot worse than us. Right? This is the world of Schadenfreude. And that's why the Bancroft and Smith and Warner are being punished so hard. The Australians do not want the other British Commonwealth nations laughing at them. It's also the world of jealousy, envy, greed, and often seeking exhilaration, because a little bit of fun now and again can help you forget about the miserable situation that you might be in. Now, what about deeper down here from 3 through 6? Well, the key for level 3 maturity is that we have a sense of purpose, we understand as a customer, and we value customer service and satisfying those customers. And therefore, to be able to do that, there needs to be some sort of altruism involved. And we've got compassion, empathy. What's good for us is good for me. What's good for them is good for us. So if we help our customers, there's this belief that somehow that will be good for us. If the customers are happy, then we'll probably have a good and healthy business. And at an individual level, if I help the team, if I help the department, if I help the bigger tribe, then maybe that will reflect well upon me later. It's not a transaction. I don't go and negotiate and say, okay, I'm going to help you guys today, but you owe me something. Right? It's not firmly, it's just this belief. And actually, human beings are inherently wired for this. They've studied in pre-linguistic children, so the sort of age when they're just crawling about or maybe toddling. They've studied interesting things, like very simple experiments, like it's a sort of kitchen setting, and the child's on the floor in the kitchen playing with something, and an adult who is known to the child, could be the mother, some family member, comes in and pretends to struggle to open a door on a kitchen cabinet. And then the other experiment is that it's a complete stranger that tries the same problem. And regardless of whether it's a family member or a stranger, this pre-linguistic child tries to help, will crawl over and try to assist at the opening. So we're inherently wired to be altruistic because presumably it's helped us survive. We understand that we're herd animals and that we have to contribute to the herd for the overall safety of the herd. Right. There's also appreciative joy at the success and good fortune of others. Right. It's the opposite of Schadenfreude, and it turns out there is no German word for that. Right. The Germans have a compound word for laughing at other people's misfortune, but they don't have a compound word for enjoying the good fortune of someone else. And actually, you have to look pretty hard. And that the two best options are mudita, which is from Buddhism, and altruhedonism. These are the two best options. The Yiddish have this word natches, which apparently is very similar to mudito, but obviously it's a niche population that would understand that word. So altruhedonism or mudita exists in these deeper levels of maturity. And the pursuit of pleasure through the selfless concern for the welfare of others. That's the meaning. Right. Appreciative joy at the success and good fortune of others, and pursuit of pleasure at the selfless concern. The second one is the meaning for altruhedonism. What else? Oh, we went. Low maturity leaders invoke identity. They strengthen social cohesion and they drive conformity. They excommunicate people who don't conform, and they're intolerant of any sort of variation. You know, if you're not behaving exactly like the way that we should as a tribe, then you're out. And it's actually a low energy level of leadership. It's lazy leadership. Low maturity tribal leadership is lazy leadership. On the other hand, to go through these deeper levels, provide a sense of purpose necessary for level 3, define and communicate the why necessary for level 3, actively manage the identity, make the values explicit of the organization, the tribe, whatever you're leading. Invest in improved capability, people, skills, equipment. Think for the longer term, not just the immediate future. Constantly challenge how in order to open up more possibilities for what. Every time we develop a new skill, we might then be able to develop a new thing, product or service that we sell. Challenge and redefine the purpose of why we exist, because sometimes the why will be obviated in society, and other times the who could be. Imagine that you're running a transatlantic ocean liner business in 1957, and you run ships from, say, Liverpool, Glasgow, Belfast, Southampton, and Hamburg to Boston and New York. And what happened in 1957? The arrival of the Comet Mark IV, the first commercial jet airliner that could fly across the Atlantic. It was an extinction-level event for the transatlantic liner companies. Most of them, the ones that only did sailing across the Atlantic, were out of business within a year. And others that survived, like P&O, Peninsula and Oriental, because they had a bigger portfolio, they lost one piece of the portfolio and then they're able to carry on with the rest of the portfolio and eventually reinvent themselves as a cruise liner company. So level 6 leaders are capable of handling those kind of transitions and recognizing things like, you know what, maybe that old identity is irrelevant, or it's going to be irrelevant very soon, and we need to reinvent ourselves as something else, or it might kill us. Some more here. So the low maturity leaders, it's all about relative measure. I don't care if we're winning so long as I'm scoring. So if I'm a player on the team, as long as my performance was great, I'm golden. I don't care if the team wins. Or if we don't care if we're winning so long as our rivals are losing. So not to suggest that this would be true of, say, Manchester City and Manchester United, but you can be sure that if City are losing and United are winning, the United fans are pretty happy about that. But would they be happy if they were down in the 4th division rather than playing in the Premier League? Well, probably not, right? For them, it's about absolute measure. If we're not winning, we're not good enough. It's irrelevant what our rivals are doing. Now, when I was growing up as a child, I remember my mother saying to me things like, I don't care when the other kids go to bed, I decide when you go to bed, and you go to bed at that time. Right? That's at least level 3 parenting. Right? We compete with ourselves at these higher maturity levels to our own standards, our own expectations, our own goals. And if you think about some of the best sportsmen, almost in any sport, whichever one you love, many of them will say that this is what they do. They focus on their own performance. They don't focus on the competition. We aspire to perfection, to be the example against which all others are measured. That's really a level 5 thing. And our history doesn't define us, our future does. Level 6 leadership. All right, so let's look at some examples of level 6 leaders. This is Hardeep Singh Kohli. I'm going to guess that almost no one has heard of him. Anyone heard of Hardeep Singh Kohli? Andy Carmichael, people have been at my speech before, but Andy Carmichael's from the UK. Hardeep Singh Kohli is a comedian, a celebrity TV chef, and he's also a surrogate or proxy for the leadership of the Scottish National Party. Hardeep Singh Kohli is born in London, that's not in Scotland, to Punjabi Indian parents who obviously originally were not British, and he moved to Glasgow when he was 4 years old. But if you heard him speak, he sounds more Scottish than me, and he looks quite a lot more Scottish than me, or at least the way he dresses. But there's something wrong here. Scotland didn't have people that looked like him when I was 2, 3, 4 years old. Right? And what's he wearing here, guys? Is this Indian cricket team or Indian soccer team? This is an Indian tracksuit top. Right? So he's still got that affiliation with India. But when there's an election happening in Scotland, or they're counting the votes and it's late into the night, he's sitting on BBC answering questions on behalf of the Scottish National Party. This is the new face of Scottish nationalism. The Scottish National Party is unique in Europe in terms of a national party because it's all about redefining what it means to be Scottish, and the concept that if people like Hardeep Singh want to come, we must be doing something right. The more people that are coming, the better we must be. People must love Scotland. So the metric is, the more guys who don't look like traditional Scottish people, the better we're doing. Redefining what it means to be Scotland. Right, here's the Seattle link here. Bruce Lee, graduate of the University of Washington here in Seattle, redefined Chinese martial arts. 3,000 years worth of teaching Chinese martial arts, and he came along and said, no, that's not the way you should be doing it. All right. Level 6 leadership. This is Billy Bean, the general manager of the Oakland Athletics, or maybe he's been promoted now. But apparently, Billy Bean is now on the board of various other sports teams, including some soccer teams. And if you've seen the movie Moneyball, you'll understand that he played a significant role in redefining what it meant to be a baseball team and how to play baseball and how to select the players. And not everyone in baseball loved him for that. So here's a scene from the movie. Now, you know you've achieved something significant in life when you're still in the job when they make the movie about you and Brad Pitt plays you in the movie. And here's a bit of dialogue from the movie where Brad Pitt's talking with the scouts, and actually many of the guys in this scene are the real guys. They're not actors. If you look carefully on the website, and most of these guys actually are Oakland Athletic scouts. And Brad Pitt is saying something that presumably the real Billy Bean had actually said, which is, this is a new direction of the Oakland Athletics. We're card counters at the blackjack table. We're going to turn the tables on the casino. Now, it's a metaphor, but it's a metaphor that redefines the identity of the Oakland Athletics. This is Marissa Mayer. She's not the most popular person on this coast because she did something that people didn't understand. Now I'm going to explain it to you. Marissa Mayer's job was to reinvent the identity of Yahoo. What was Yahoo's original identity? Who's old enough to remember that? They were a portal. What happened to portals? They got killed by Google. So the issue was that search engines, remember Alta Vista? It wasn't quite good enough. It wasn't fit for purpose. So we needed to have a portal. And Yahoo grew up as the winner in the portal business, and it made them very rich. But it was like being an ocean liner company in the Atlantic in 1957 when Google arrived. It was the Comet Mark IV. And all of a sudden, everyone was Googling and portals weren't worth anything anymore. But Yahoo was incredibly rich. So what happened at Yahoo is it turned into a zombie. It was the Walking Dead, and it kind of just walked around, tried all sorts of different lines of business, didn't know who the heck it was for 15, 18 years, till Marissa Mayer came along and realized it was a zombie. And she had to do something about it, and she decided she was going to turn it into a media business. And that meant shedding off whole business units and firing a whole bunch of people, including dismantling one of the biggest Kanban implementations in the world at Yahoo in Bangalore, because that whole office building just got closed. Everyone got laid off. Right, now, part of the way that she did this, and one of the thing that sort of made her controversial is this conference call where she announced, this is paraphrasing, "We don't value Yahoos who sit at home in their pajamas on VPN. We value Yahoos who come into the office and work collaboratively with their colleagues." And most of the tech industry on this coast thought that was a regressive step. But what she's actually doing here is redefining the culture of the company. She is communicating a new value system. And if she follows through with that, and her leadership team follow through with it, and they reward the people who come to work, the office, and work collaboratively with colleagues, and they don't reward the people who sit at home in their pajamas, eventually those people who want to sit at home in their pajamas on VPN will leave the company and go find another home that does value them. This is how you reinvent culture as a level 6 leader. Right, when someone says to you, you can't change the culture of a company, you just have to create a new one, that is a low maturity leader who is speaking to you. What it means is they are not capable of reinventing the culture of a company. But you could be. And people that you coach and advise could be. You can change the culture of companies. There are plenty of examples, and I'm going to show you some more. This is Richard Branson. He's another level 6 leader. Right, what's the identity of the Virgin Group? They're not a record label, but they are. They're not a retailer, but they are. They're not a travel company, but they are. They're not an airline, but they are. They're not a communication company, but they are. Right? They have their own mobile phone brands. They're not a media company, but they are. And they're not a fitness company, but they are. And the South Africans in the room will know that South Africa is populated with lots of Virgin fitness centres. And the same in the United Kingdom. On any given day, you can make a snapshot of all the Virgin businesses, and this is just one from a few years ago. Virgin can do almost anything. Its identity is essentially just the brand, Richard Branson's personality, and the brand essence, which is this idea that we're fun, irreverent, we do everything with superior customer service, and it's cool. With the exception of Virgin Galactic, which is just cool, because Richard wants it. Right? So as long as they can adhere to those things, they can be Virgin Mobile and Virgin America at the same time. And everyone still thinks of himself as one of the Virgins. This is Lou Gerstner. Right? He's another level 6 leader, another person who reinvented the culture of a massive company. Right? Gerstner, who disguised a massive change as merely evolution. Right? In a press conference where he said, the last thing IBM needs now is a new strategy. We're just going to get better at what we already do. Then he proceeded to get rid of about 1,500 people a week for 2 years, maybe more. And then once they reached a pivot point, they started hiring 1,500 new people a week for another couple of years. So about a 350,000 person company churned out 250,000 of the people. Completely reinvented them from a mainframe manufacturer into a professional services business. And IBM actually has a history of these reinventions. First of all, Thomas Watson Sr., the founder of the company, merged 4 businesses into what was originally called CTR, the Computing, Tabulating, and Recording Company. And then a couple of years later, they renamed that IBM, or International Business Machines. Then his son, Thomas Watson Jr., he reinvented them as a mainframe manufacturer in the 1960s, initially with the System 360 series of mainframes. And then Gerstner came along in the 1990s and reinvented them as a professional services business. Notice that it's a great leader that's required, right? At points in IBM's history, they've had a level 6 leader who has transitioned them through some necessary identity change in order to ensure the survival of the business. This is a couple of quotes from Gerstner. Until I came to IBM, I probably would have told you that culture was just one among several important elements in an organization's makeup and success. Along with vision, strategy, marketing, financials, and the like, I came to see in my time at IBM that culture isn't just one aspect of the game, it is the game. For him, as the chairman, the leader, his job is to change the culture. Fixing culture is the most critical and the most difficult part of a corporate transformation. How many of you are transformation people here? About half the audience. You've just learned the most important thing that you have to do with your clients. In the end, management doesn't change the culture. Management invites the workforce itself to change the culture. Oh. Now, this guy's a new entry at level 6. In my earlier presentations, he was nestling down in level 3 through 5, along with his predecessor and his predecessor's predecessor. Now, Eric Brechner in the room here knows this gentleman personally. And Eric tipped me off when I previously presented some of this material that Satya Nadella was indeed the level 6 leader. And if you've been paying attention over the last couple of weeks, you'll know that there's no longer a Windows division at Microsoft. Satya Nadella is reinventing the identity of this company after how long is it? 43 years, right? So, historically, it was a developer tools company, and he ran the developer tools division. Developer tools and platform company, Windows and Office being the platform, and that's been their identity since the beginning. Developer tools and operating systems for PCs, and then productivity suite for PCs, and everything else largely peripheral. If you chopped off the Xbox division and floated it on the stock market and it sailed away on its own, Microsoft wouldn't have cried. Right? It's its own thing. Right? It's not core to their identity. So Satya Nadella, new entry in the number 6. Now, I had to edit out the Pope in order to squeeze him into this presentation. Right? Because the previous version of this presentation, Nelson Mandela was the second last example, and Pope Francis was the final example. Nelson Mandela, and why this particular photograph of Nelson Mandela? How many of you have seen Invictus? A few of you. So you'll know the story. That Nelson Mandela's job was to reinvent South Africa as the rainbow nation and to prevent it degenerating into Zimbabwe 2.0. And he figured out that the way that he could win over the large majority of the white population, the ethnically Dutch, the Boers, was with rugby. And the ANC negotiated to bring the Rugby World Cup to South Africa in 1995, and Nelson Mandela supported that effort. And here he is presenting the World Cup to Francois Pienaar, the captain of the team. They had just defeated the world #1 team, New Zealand, in the final. Mandela is actually wearing Pienaar's #6 jersey. Now, you have to understand the history of South Africa and the Apartheid era to realize this green jersey here and the playing of rugby was so core to the Boer identity. It was essentially a symbol of the enemy to the black population, to the Xhosa and the Zulus and the other smaller tribes. And Mandela supporting the rugby was something that his own people didn't understand. They didn't understand it until they won. Now, if you want some better insight on this, you should talk to, I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your name? No, not Berto, but Kelly, yeah. So she was a young girl at the time and vividly remembers this, right? And they're actually both from Pretoria, which is the capital of South Africa, close to Johannesburg, and the final took place in Johannesburg. So Nelson Mandela didn't see his job as worrying too much about improving the bus service, right? Which is actually an important thing. You know, if you talk with poorer South Africans, they complain about the quality of the bus service. It's got better over 20 years. But Mandela realized that his one job was to make sure there was still a South Africa 5 years later, and that it was a unified South Africa, the Rainbow Nation. Level 6 leaders make enemies because they do stuff that people in their own tribes don't understand. Marissa Mayer's made enemies. Nelson Mandela obviously made enemies. Their actions are often only appreciated retrospectively. Absolutely true of Nelson Mandela. They need immense resilience. In his case, 27 years in prison. And then all the significant stuff he did after that, he was in his 70s and 80s. They need a deep well of energy to fuel them, because level 6 leaders get out of bed every day and people are telling them they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. Identity wins. Right? And it's very, very hard to overcome that. Right? That's why level 6 leaders are relatively rare, and they're only needed at certain times. And probably the energy level needed to be that level of leader isn't something you can sustain for your whole life, unless you're Richard Branson and you're like the Energizer Bunny. Right? Level 6 leaders redefine identity, they reinvent organizations. But let's just take a look fairly quickly at what other levels of leadership would look like. Level 1, this is Jacob Zuma, the very recently departed third president of the Republic of South Africa. And Jacob Zuma is now on trial for corruption. At the moment, the trial's only for 16 charges of corruption, but there are more than 760 allegations against him. This is a picture of Jacob Zuma's house in Kandla, in KwaZulu-Natal. And he spent the equivalent of 24 million US dollars making a few upgrades while he was the president. So he was the it's all about me level 1 leader. Now, on the 15th of February, the African National Congress, the ANC, Nelson Mandela's political party, ousted Jacob Zuma as the president of South Africa and replaced him with Cyril Ramaphosa that we met earlier. This is him, now. He's lost the beard and his hair compared with the older photograph we saw. Now, what that tells us about the ANC nationally is that they're actually quite mature, that they disapproved of Zuma's behavior. They realized they had to get rid of him, and they replaced him with the protege of Nelson Mandela, the guy who was sitting beside Mandela at the negotiating table, creating the new constitution, someone who absolutely understands Mandela's vision for the Rainbow Nation. That's not to say that South Africa isn't out of the woods. There are still plenty of white South Africans that are worried about the future, and there are things going on like land reform which are causing uncertainty and a lot of emotion at the moment. So Ramaphosa has his work cut out, but the general feeling was that if they'd left Zuma in power even for another 1.5 years, then the slippery slope towards Zimbabwe 2.0 was well underway. Level 1 leaders are selfish, often narcissistic and manipulative. Can you think of any you might know? Level 2 leadership. Cape Town's running out of water. You might have heard about this. It's the first big city in the world, 4.5 million population, might run out of water completely. And they call the day they're going to run out of water day zero, and it was actually forecast to be April the 12th, which is what, the day after tomorrow. So a few months ago, they asked the population of Cape Town to use less water. And that program is working. And the consequence is that they've now managed to push day zero out to next year. This is the mayor of Cape Town, Patricia de Lille. Cape Town hasn't too many options in terms of how to get more water. And the most obvious one is desalination, to get drinking water from the sea. And Patricia de Lille believes that the city can't afford it. We can't afford to build desalination plants. She's the mayor. If you're the mayor of a new town, what's the number one thing you need to provide for the population before they can do anything else? Drinking water. And maybe, some shelter, but basic Maslow hierarchy things. Mayors of any city, drinking water should be their number one concern. But no, we can't afford it. Now, what are the consequences of not affording it? What's the consequence of hitting day zero? Well, they'll start bringing water in tankers like they do in Bangalore, which is probably the second city in the world that might run out of water. And that means that rich people can afford water and poor people can't afford water. Well, of the 4.5 million people in Cape Town, about 2.5 million of them are dirt poor, living in townships or even worse, shanty towns. So imagine that their day zero arrives and now you've got 2.5 million people who don't have drinking water, while a bunch of richer people who are mostly white and therefore easily identified are bringing the water in tankers. What happens next? Riots at the very least. And when that's happened in South Africa historically, it has not been pretty. So, Patricia de Lille's part of the Democratic Alliance, the DA, and her party wanted rid of her. So they filed a vote of no confidence against their own leader in the City Hall. And they're the main party in the Western Cape, that province, and in Cape Town. The ANC are the second party. Well, the ANC locally in Cape Town decided to vote against. In other words, they supported Patricia de Lille when her own party were trying to get rid of her. And on the 15th of February, she survived. That's the same day that the ANC nationally got rid of Zuma and replaced him with Ramaphosa. She survived the vote of no confidence, and she's still the mayor of Cape Town today. So what's going on there? The ANC believe that she's so incompetent, it makes the DA look bad. And when the election comes up, the next elections, their share of the vote will increase because the DA looks so embarrassingly bad under the leadership of Patricia de Lille. But the risk that they're playing is that the city ran out of water before the election occurred. Right? At best, it's level 2 leadership. Right? So nationally, the ANC are right up there, level 5, level 6 leadership, and have just appointed a guy who looks like the new level 6 leader of South Africa. But at local level, they're petty, tribal. Picture of the ANC, right? Level 2 leaders are tribal. They promote relative assessment. They make others look bad in order that we might look better in comparison. And this is a beautiful example of it. Right. We're running out of time, but my whole thoughts on this came together after the keynote of this guy at Kanban, India, Sri Swami Shantatmananda, a high-ranking member of the clergy in the Hindu religion. And paraphrasing towards the end of his keynote, freedom is bound by your identity. Adopt an expansive sense of your identity to set you free. and shift from a victim mentality to a contributor mentality to set you free and achieve fulfillment. And that made me realize that levels 0, 1, and 2 in our model were the victim levels, right? And then the contributor mentality kicks in at level 3. So we have Sri Swami Santamananda to thank for that. I'm getting better at pronouncing that name, guys. So Dilbert is a victim. Now, Dilbert's pointy-haired boss might not be the greatest of leaders, but Dilbert and all his colleagues, they're just victims. They're trapped, they're not free, they're essentially slaves. And it's the world of Schadenfreude. Deeper maturity sets you free. Level 3 values like customer service, respect, understanding, leadership, altruism, and contribution set you free and offer you fulfillment in life. Now, there's someone in the room here who used to have the word victim on his social media profile. And I'm not going to name him because I'm going to give him the opportunity whether he wants to reveal himself or not. And at the time when he took the word victim off his profile, he thanked those that he'd been working with for giving him that enlightenment. Do you want to say something, Travis Birch?
Yeah, just to clarify, it wasn't actually on my profile, but I posted that, I made an announcement. I'm removing victim from my identity, and I want to thank, those helping. And then you responded by directing me to the keynote.
Which you hadn't seen before, but it reinforced the model that we have. So thank you very much, Travis, for speaking up. Right, Richard Branson's leadership at Virgin creates that freedom that Sri Swami Santamananda is looking for. And this is a real picture of Richard from some promotion he was doing in India. Right, level 3 leadership. I actually struggled to find examples of level 3, maybe because it's too boring, but this guy's not boring. Right, so why is he a level 3 leader? And actually he's borderline level 2 because he didn't show any regard for regulatory authorities. Well, Uber had a sense of purpose, but it was a sense of purpose at any cost. It's a company that's losing over $1 billion a year. It's not economically stable. And eventually, for various reasons, he had to go. He was fragile as the leader, and they replaced him with this guy, Dara Khoshrow Shahi, who used to run Expedia here in town. Now, he's more of a level 4 leader, a leader that isn't just all about the customer, recognizes there's a bunch of other stakeholders' concerns, and that we need to hedge our risk and manage portfolios. And that we don't just have this myopic view of the one thing that needs to be achieved. Yes, a sense of why, but it's a sense of why in proportion. Now, this guy's one of our clients, and he's Dara's big former competitor. This is Dana Dunn from eDreams Odigio, and we've got Ivan Font here somewhere. Ivan was there. Dana was his big boss. And these guys are one of the biggest implementations of ESP and Kanban in the world, the number 2 travel agent, online travel agent in the world after Expedia. Right, level 4 managers manage risks. Yes, there's a sense of why, but it's a regulated sense of why. All right, level 5. Some examples. Bruce McLaren, founder of the McLaren Formula One team. And at the time when Bruce McLaren was tragically killed in a training practice session, McLaren was probably a level 3 or 4 sort of maturity company. But this is a quote from McLaren: "To do something well is so worthwhile that to die trying to do it better cannot be foolhardy. It would be a waste of life to do nothing without one's ability, for I feel that life is measured in achievement, not in years alone." That is undoubtedly the statement of at least a level 5 leader. This is his successor, Ron Dennis, who reverse merged his company into McLaren about 10 years after Bruce McLaren died. Ron Dennis turned the McLaren Formula One team into the business that it is today, with its reputation and its history as the second most successful race car team after Ferrari. In other words, what we've got here is the Toyota of Formula One, of open wheel car racing. In fact, all Formula One teams are really level 5 maturity. They have to be or they can't survive at that level. And McLaren were effectively the archetype. What Bruce McLaren started became the model that they all measured themselves against. And Formula One teams, including Ferrari, that I've worked with in the past, looked up to McLaren as the gold standard, as the benchmark that they had to meet. This is Alex Ferguson, the former manager of Manchester United. 26 years as the leader of Manchester United. 21 of those years he won some championship or another. The most successful professional sports team coach in any sport, anywhere in the world in history. Retired to become a visiting professor at Harvard Business School at the age of 70. Level 5 leaders relentlessly pursue perfection. They desire to be the best and they lead the fittest for purpose organizations. Manchester United didn't win every trophy they might have won. They only won the European Championship twice. But they're the most profitable soccer team in the world with the largest fan base. How do you measure what makes you fit for purpose? What are your fitness criteria? So, shouldn't we be starting with why? Right? Simon Sinek, you'll have heard of him. Start with why. Well, if you look carefully in the subtitle, great leaders use why to inspire to take action. So, in other words, if you're not a great leader, you're dealing with who. Right? And to get through that threshold to what we call level 3 and deeper, you need a why. So you don't start with why, you start with who. Who explains Brexit? Who explains Nelson Mandela's approach to unifying the Rainbow Nation and preventing a second Zimbabwe? Right? Great leaders use why to get beyond who. Without understanding and managing who you are, why you exist may not be enough to create consistent, congruent action. You'll get incongruence because people will take action based on who they are as a company or as individuals from time to time against the why, the how, the what that we do. So conclusions here, we're a little bit over time. First who, then why. You have to learn to manage the identity in the organization, learn to manage the culture, the values, or coach the people who should be doing it. We're going to have to codify this as part of the leadership practices and the extensions for the KMM. An organization's maturity is limited by its leadership maturity. If you've got a level 2 leader and you're trying to do level 3 or level 4 things, they're not going to stick. They're going to fail after time because the leaders haven't created the culture and the value system to support them. Business outcomes and aspirations will always be constrained by the culture and the values. Right, so here is a brief summary of the 6 levels, 1 through 6, right? Selfish, tribal, altruistic, and purpose-driven, risk manager, relentless perfectionist, and a culture and identity manager. Level 6 leaders are those sociologists. Right? In Mandela's words, it was a human calculation to play the Boers at rugby. Right. So I left you thinking about this. Should we ban the old flag of the Republic of South Africa in order to prevent this provocative young white supremacist from waving it at protest marches? So, raise your hand if you think that the flag should be banned. Wow. Maybe just one, not hand fully up. And I agree with that. I think you don't ban the flag, right? My opinion on this is banning the old flag only strengthens the social cohesion of those who are abusing it, right? Their sense of victimhood will energize them. The ban strengthens the value of the symbol, and it's unlikely to be completely effective because they will keep flying it and using it at every opportunity, even though it's banned. So the alternative is that you have to continue to be tolerant and respect the idea that he has freedom of expression and it's his constitutional right to wave the flag, whilst trying to create the social norm that this type of use of the old flag isn't acceptable. Because really, why is the old flag still there? Well, there was a whole bunch of people that loved the old flag who were still alive and still had a vote. And at some point, those people will have died off, and a younger generation of South Africans who've grown up with the new flag won't care about this anymore, and it'll just fade away and die. And you can extend this set of logic to, should we take the statues down or not? Should we rename the universities? Should we rename the streets? Because they happen to be named after people who had the wrong ethnicity 150 years ago. Right, so I've been told to remind you that the book signing is going to happen across the way. And with that, thank you all very much.
Thank you, David.